One of the things that I most enjoy as the United States Senator is the opportunity to meet with students from my home state of Maine, a sentiment that I'm sure that many of my colleagues share. Yesterday, I had breakfast with my summer interns who attend 6 different colleges and universities. We discussed the incidence of sexual assault on their campuses and what can be done to halt this crime and meet the needs of survivors. These students had 3 insightful recommendations. First, they all support mandatory ongoing training for all students. Second, they emphasize that students who are assaulted need a confidential advisor to whom they can turn. And third, as Chairman Alexander mentioned, they believed it was important to make sure that disciplinary procedures are fair, both for those who are assaulted and for those who are accused. There are 2 federal laws to help combat sexual assault on campuses, the Clery Act and Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. Last Congress, provisions of the Clery Act were updated by the enactment of the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization. Senator Casey, a member of this committee, helped lead the effort to include important reforms in VAWA related to sexual assault prevention on campuses. On July 1st, the Department of Education issued new regulations implementing these amendments to ensure that campuses have policies and procedures in place to prevent and respond to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. These laws include requirements that educational institutions file annual reports on the crimes occurring on campus, institute security policies, and have fair disciplinary procedures for sexual assault cases, employ a Title IX coordinator, educate students and staff about sexual assault prevention and awareness, notify survivors about their rights and the resources available to them, and provide for staff training. Many colleges and universities are also engaged proactively in raising awareness about sexual assault among the student body. For example, the University of Maine launched its Office of Sexual Assault and Violence Prevention last year and has undertaken a campaign to educate students through posters, brochures, presentations, and training. Mercedes Dubé, an intern in my office and a senior at the University of Southern Maine, who happens to hail from my hometown of Caribou, told me that the Office of Greek Life requires students in sororities and fraternities to participate in sexual assault, domestic violence, and alcohol and drug awareness training each year. The system we have in place is designed to allow administrators to intervene quickly on behalf of students in a way that is separate from the judicial system. I hope that this hearing will inform the committee of what in the current system is working, what needs to be changed, and whether additional reforms are needed to help keep students safe while respecting the privacy of sexual assault survivors who may be reluctant to report these crimes, and providing due process rights for all students. This committee has formed a bipartisan working group to explore campus sexual assault and campus safety in greater detail. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how we can build consensus around this important issue. Thank you very much for your testimony. We have just been notified that votes have started. We're going to have 2 votes, and we'll have a recess while we do vote, but we will be able to continue for now and get through some questions before people have to leave to vote. We'll limit senators to 5 minutes on this round. I do also want to announce that Senator Alexander will be returning, and after the votes, he will take over as chairman. It's been a great experience, and I would have liked to have continued, but I will turn over the gavel, albeit reluctantly, to the legitimate chairman of the committee. Ms. Floundlacker, I want to pick up on a point that you commented on about the confidential advisor. I'm a strong supporter of the confidential advisor. I've been surprised when I've talked to the University of Maine and other colleges that it turns out that this is not as straightforward as I thought that it would be. On the one hand, confidentiality really focuses on the victim, and that's what we should do. And it may encourage student victims to report violations and seek the help that they need. On the other hand, the requirements of Title IX and the Clery Act require various forms of reporting when crimes occur on campus. And indeed, the Department of Education's 2014 guidance says that, quote, there are situations in which a school must override a student's request for confidentiality in order to meet its Title IX obligations. So it seems to me we're putting schools between a rock and a hard place unless we get some clarity here. How can colleges and universities provide the confidential services and advising that many of us think are vital to students while balancing and meeting the requirements of both federal, in some cases state law, and the desire to respond effectively?
I think, Senator, you've identified a very important issue. We want to get the confidential advisor right. It's an essential service offered to students. As you articulated, as I mentioned in my opening comments, we have concerns that as currently drafted, the advisor would be tasked with responsibilities that really go outside of what we think should be the core responsibility of counseling a student. And as you mentioned, in addition to our issues with any fact-finding or investigatory powers or reporting requirements, potential conflict with Title IX is a real concern and one that we'll have to address in the legislation in order to get this right. And part of the issue in the legislation, and if I'm getting too technical, please stop me, Senator, part of the issue is that in the legislation, the advisor may liaise with an institution to make accommodations. So this would be changes in a dorm room or a change in classroom, for example. And it says explicitly it shall not trigger an investigation by the school. And clearly schools are committed to providing accommodations and to maintaining confidentiality. The problem is many schools typically believe that if they're making accommodations for a student, it's sufficient to warrant an investigation by an institution. Moreover, as the senator articulated, institutions are required under Title IX to track and report accommodations provided in response to sexual assault. So there is a clear conflict here. I think that there are some solutions, and we'd very much like to be a part of that conversation. So for example, it would be better for the advisor to let the survivor know where to go, who to talk to about making accommodations, rather than that advisor actually carrying through the process themselves. So I think that there are solutions here. And again, we just have to keep focusing on the core responsibility of the advisor, which is to counsel and make sure the guidance is very clear so schools know what they're doing and survivors understand what the advisor can do to help them.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the rest of you to respond for the record to that issue because I think there is a clear conflict between the rules and the regulations. But I want to get quickly to a second topic in my remaining time. Ms. Bulger, we have climate surveys that our military academies do, and they have a very high response rate because the students know that they are expected to fill out those climate surveys. That is not necessarily the case for private colleges and public universities. What suggestions would you have to encourage students to participate in the climate surveys so that they're meaningful?
Thank you for that question, and it's a very good one. I think that in thinking through climate surveys, we have to remember that this is just one piece of a larger effort to change the culture around sexual violence on campus. And so that means doing education work and outreach and training to students that raises the profile of them of this issue and helps them understand how incredibly important it is. I think we have, to be honest, seen a lot of change on campuses over just the last couple of years as students' peers who are survivors are coming forward and telling their stories publicly. And so I suppose I'm a bit more optimistic that students will want to be part of the process to complete these surveys. I do think that we should certainly build on existing structures on campuses, existing structures of students. So we have fraternities, we have sports teams, we have sororities. These are groups of people who already come together around shared values. And I think that if we can create buy-in among people in those communities, we will see much higher response rates to these surveys.
Thank you. Senator Murray.